Joining us now, Democratic member of the Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. Senator, good morning. Happy New Year to you. Let's start.
Happy New Year.
Let's start overseas, and there's no shortage of news. But let's begin with Venezuela. The president has, commissioned dozens at this point of strikes on boats. Then last week there was news that the U.S. has hit at least once on land in Venezuela as well. And now Maduro suggesting he's open to negotiations. What's your thought on where things stand right now? We seem to be approaching some sort of inflection point.
Well, look, President Trump ran on lowering your costs, making America healthy again, and avoiding stupid new wars overseas. He's failing on all three. Healthcare costs are going to skyrocket now for millions of Americans. That was part of the surprise of New Year's for folks who get their health care through the Affordable Care Act. But in Venezuela, he's been sleepwalking without a clear policy or a clear path forward into a conflict with one of our hemisphere's most capable authoritarian regimes. Has this really been about interdicting drugs? Maduro's willing to negotiate about stopping the regime's support for drug trafficking. Is this about access to oil? That is something President Trump's talked about, and his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, admitted in a Vanity Fair article that, frankly, this is about regime change. In neither case does it make sense, with no plan for what would come next, for us to use American soldiers and military force to directly try to overthrow Maduro. So this might be the off-ramp that Trump needs. And frankly, he has to focus on the war in Ukraine, on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, on the status of Taiwan, all big issues where he has failed to use tools at his disposal. One last point. He's been using our military to interdict oil tankers because there is this ghost fleet that helps keep Venezuela's regime alive. He should be using those same tools to interdict the ghost fleet that helps fund Russia's brutal war machine, that helps keep the Iranian regime alive, and helps support North Korea. He'd get bipartisan support for more actions to get tough on Putin and to begin to slow the flow of money into Putin's murderous war machine against Ukraine.
Yeah, the Ukrainians have targeted some of Russia's ghost fleet, perhaps with some U.S. assistance. But you're right, it has not been a significant priority for this president. You mentioned Iran. Let's go there next. The president at 3 a.m. Posting that the U.S. will be locked and loaded, in his words, about what's going on in Tehran. Now, certainly there's some hope to be seen, perhaps, in some of these the protests there. You can see the Truth Social post on your screen right now, Senator. But this is a remarkable escalation in rhetoric.
It is. And one of the most unsettling and dangerous things that President Trump does is these unhinged tweets at 3 a.m. There have been nights recently where he fires off 100 tweets on a dozen different subjects. And I feel for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. If you were responsible for leading the U.S. military and implementing directives from our commander-in-chief, what would you conclude from that tweet? That we are locked and loaded and ready to go to support Iran's protesters. I do think it's appropriate to put more pressure on Iran's regime to say to protesters, we see you and we support the Iranian people in their legitimate aspirations to be out from under this terrible regime. But to threaten military action, to say we're locked and loaded, is just another empty threat, like Trump's threats to take over Greenland or Panama or Canada. And it frankly means that leaders around the world are either laughing at us or scared by what he's going to tweet next at 3 a.m. tonight.
Yeah, it reminded me of his fire and fury threats to North Korea back in the first term. You mentioned this. The president is at times really angry rhetoric in these tweets, but one place he hasn't directed that rhetoric, at least not often, is the Kremlin and Russian President Vladimir Putin. I think there is a sense that the Ukrainians at least feel like, well, the tenor of our talks with the U.S. have been better of late, but still a long way to go in terms of getting a deal done. And yet the president has still not shown any inclination to put real pressure. The tools, you mentioned, the tools he has at his disposal, he's not using them against Putin.
That's right. One of the striking things about President Trump's budget request for the military this year was it stripped out all funding for support for Ukraine. I'm the senior Democrat on defense appropriations, and we're working hard to make sure that those resources for intelligence sharing, for the purchase of our weapon systems by Europe, and support for Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression remain a part of our posture with our allies in Europe. He's tried doing everything he can to give Putin what he wants, literally rolling out the red carpet for him in a meeting in Alaska now months ago. And he's pushed and pushed and pushed Zelensky and the brave men and women of Ukraine to make concessions of territory. Frankly, at this point, Putin's response is blindingly clear. Night after night, Putin launches waves of drones and missiles at civilian targets. The First Lady is clear about what's going on. She's demanding that her husband, the president, take action against a murderous regime that has kidnapped tens of thousands of young Ukrainians. And there is bipartisan support in the Senate for us to take stronger action against Putin's regime for all the war crimes they've committed. It's time for Trump to be clear. Putin's playing him for a fool. He looks like a man who doesn't understand who's the aggressor and who's the victim, and he can end this war if he puts pressure on Putin.
Senator Coons, hi, it's Molly Jong-Fast. I was wondering about the Epstein files. The Department of Justice has 5.2 million pages of Epstein-related documents left to review. They've had these documents for years, right? Can you explain to us what is happening here? Because that seems pretty insane.
I certainly can't justify it. And the only explanation I can come up with, Molly, is that they've been dragging their feet on complying with a law that passed Congress almost unanimously. It passed the Senate unanimously, and Trump was forced to sign it. They didn't just miss their deadline to release all the Epstein files. They blew right past it, clearly because they are trying as hard as possible to make sure there's nothing in there that is damaging or embarrassing to Trump and some of his billionaire friends. So, frankly, this is an embarrassment that the Department of Justice has profoundly failed to meet this moment, to stand up for victims, to meet the transparency requirements that Congress has imposed on them. And the idea that it's going to take them weeks or months of hundreds of Department of Justice employees going through these files when they've had a year to do it is just another striking example of them failing at their core mission, which in this case is standing up for victims.
So, Senator Coons, obviously Congress, including the Senate, gets back in session next week. One of the questions right off the gate will be about Jack Smith, whether he's going to be testifying for the Senate, likely in early part of this year. There's some thought that this time it would be an open hearing. It was decidedly not open in the House when he appeared there. It was closed. But then the transcript and video released in what would only be described as a classic news dump, the afternoon of New Year's Eve, December 31st, when most of the world not paying attention. And if the Republicans' goal was to sort of obscure what Smith had to say, you could understand why. I mean, he's very forthright, very clear. And frankly, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. It seemed to be laying out a pretty strong case against President Trump on a number of realms, in particularly his handling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago.
Well, look, Jack Smith, in his testimony before the House, made it perfectly clear that President Trump was responsible for the dramatic mishandling of highly classified documents, storing them in his bathroom and his basement at Mar-a-Lago, mishandling them in a way that violates the basic principles of how we're supposed to handle highly sensitive material. I expect that we'll have him before us on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Chairman Grassley has for decades championed whistleblowers, and I think he owes it to the American people to deliver on transparency so we can be clear about what did and didn't happen and move past this chapter. Look, as we get into 2026, what I hear from Delawareans is they're concerned, even alarmed, about health care costs, about the rising costs of living from groceries to housing, about the softening job market, and about the Epstein files and Trump wandering into a war in Venezuela. having a hearing about Jack Smith is an important opportunity to set the record straight. But we also, as Democrats, coming into what's going to be an important election year, need to have a clear, crisp set of things that we will do this year to stand up to Trump and his lawless administration, and next year, if we get the opportunity to play a part in governing at the state level and the national level.
One of the most important midterm elections this nation has seen in a very long time. It is here. It is 2026. Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. Senator, thank you as always. We'll talk to you again soon.